Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the dead of night, when Genoa City's skyline glowed like a crown of cold diamonds and the Newman Tower stood silent yet watchful, Cane, Ashby and Phyllis Summers moved like shadows through the executive corridors, their hearts pounding with the weight of a secret that could shatter the most powerful man in town, because somewhere inside Victor Newman's private office, hidden behind layers of security, arrogance, and decades of ruthless control, was a laptop containing information so explosive it could rewrite the fate of every family tied to the Newman empire, and Cane, haunted by betrayal and driven by the ghosts of everything Victor had destroyed, was no longer interested in revenge alone. He wanted justice, even if it meant crossing a line that could never be uncrossed, while Phyllis, fueled by fury and her own tangled history with the Newman patriarch, whispered that this wasn't just about exposure anymore, it was about survival, because the messages they'd intercepted hinted at something far darker than corporate sabotage, something that suggested Victor had orchestrated a deadly scheme aimed at erasing a threat once and for all. And as Cane bypassed the final security firewall with trembling fingers, the screen flickered to life, revealing a series of encrypted files labeled with chilling precision, their names hinting at covert operations, offshore accounts, and a final directive that made Phyllis's blood run cold, because buried within the coded language was a clear, unmistakable instruction to neutralize a man whose identity had been masked but whose fate was already sealed. And Cane realized with horror that Victor wasn't just playing his usual power games, he was orchestrating something irreversible, something that would end in blood, and the realization sent a surge of urgency through both of them, because exposing a business scandal was one thing, but stopping a murder was another entirely. And as Phyllis scrolled through the messages, her sharp eyes caught fragments of conversations between Victor and a mysterious contact, the tone cold and commanding, the words dripping with finality, as though a human life were nothing more than a chess piece to be sacrificed for the sake of victory. And for a brief moment, Cane hesitated, haunted by the knowledge that releasing this information would not only destroy Victor's reputation but ignite a war that could consume everyone they loved. Yet the memory of all the lives Victor had manipulated, ruined and crushed under his empire hardened his resolve, and he whispered that this wasn't just about bringing down a tycoon, it was about stopping a monster. Because the files revealed plans for an untraceable hit, arranged through layers of intermediaries and shadow networks, designed to leave no fingerprints and no witnesses, and Phyllis, whose own life had been turned upside down by Victor's schemes more times than she could count, felt a fierce, almost reckless determination surge through her veins, because if Victor thought he could quietly erase someone from existence, then she would make sure the whole world saw exactly who he really was. And as they copied the data onto a secure drive, the tension in the room thickened like storm clouds, every creak of the building sounding like approaching footsteps, every second feeling like borrowed time, and yet neither of them could stop because the truth was too dangerous to leave hidden. And just as the final file transferred, Phyllis gasped when she uncovered an audio recording, a chilling voice memo in Victor's unmistakable tone, issuing a final, uncompromising order that left no room for interpretation, his words sharp, calculated, and merciless, as he instructed his contact to make sure the target never sees another sunrise. And the weight of those words crashed down on Cane like a physical blow, because suddenly this wasn't speculation or suspicion anymore. It was proof, undeniable and devastating, and for the first time in his life, Cane realized that Victor Newman wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was a man capable of ending a life without a second thought, and Phyllis, her voice barely steady, said that this evidence could send him to prison, but Cane knew it could also paint a target on their backs, because Victor never forgave, never forgot, and never lost. Yet the thought of staying silent felt even more dangerous, because if they walked away now, someone else would pay the ultimate price. And as alarms suddenly blinked on the laptop screen, signaling an attempted remote shutdown, Cane swore under his breath, realizing that Victor, or someone working for him, was already aware of the breach, and the race against time became a matter of life and death. As Phyllis yanked the flash drive free and urged Cane to move, but not before she took one last look at the damning evidence, burning every detail into her memory, because even if the digital files were destroyed, the truth now lived inside her. And as they slipped out of the office, hearts racing, they knew they had crossed a point of no return, because exposing Victor's darkest secret would trigger chaos across Genoa City, shatter alliances, and unleash consequences no one could predict. Yet beneath the fear, there was a fierce sense of purpose. Because for the first time in decades, Victor Newman's power had a crack in it, a fracture formed by two people who refused to stay silent, and while the city slept, unaware that its most feared titan had been unmasked as something far more dangerous than a corporate tyrant, Cane and Phyllis disappeared into the night, carrying with them a secret that could stop a murder, or start a war, knowing full well that Victor's response would be swift, brutal and unforgiving because a man like him would never allow his empire, his reputation or his carefully buried sins to be taken from him without a fight. And somewhere in the shadows, the storm was already gathering, promising that this was only the beginning of a deadly game where the truth could save a life, or cost many more. As dawn crept over Genoa City with a pale, uncertain light, Cane, Ashby and Phyllis Summers sat in the shadows of a deserted warehouse on the edge of town, the stolen flash drive resting between them like a ticking time bomb, because what they carried wasn't just information anymore. It was a death sentence for Victor Newman's carefully constructed empire, and the weight of that reality pressed down on them with suffocating intensity, every second stretching longer than the last as their minds replayed the chilling words from the audio recording, Victor's voice cold and final as he ordered a life to be erased, and Phyllis, who had survived more betrayals than she could count, felt a rare tremor of fear creep into her bones, not for herself, but for the unknown target whose fate had been sealed by a man who treated human lives like disposable assets, while Cane, pacing the concrete floor with restless urgency, wrestled with a storm of guilt and fury, because part of him had always known Victor was ruthless, but seeing proof of such calculated cruelty shook him to his core, and as the city slowly awakened, unaware that its most powerful kingpin had been exposed as something far more dangerous than a corporate tyrant, Cane realized they had no time to waste, because Victor would already be moving, already unleashing his network of loyal enforcers to hunt down whoever had dared to breach his inner sanctum, and Phyllis, her sharp mind racing, began outlining a plan that was as risky as it was necessary, leaking the evidence to multiple sources, trusted allies, and legal authorities all at once, so no single takedown could silence the truth, because if Victor controlled the narrative, he would bury them along with the evidence, and yet even as she spoke, doubt flickered in her eyes, because she knew better than anyone how deeply Victor's influence ran, how easily people could be bought, intimidated, or erased, and Cane, stopping in his tracks, admitted that going public would spark a war, not just with Victor, but with anyone who benefited from his power, and that meant collateral damage, shattered families, and consequences that would echo for generations. Yet the thought of doing nothing was even worse, because somewhere in Genoa City, or beyond it, a person was living their final days without even knowing it, marked for death by a man who believed himself untouchable, and that knowledge turned Cane's hesitation into resolve, his voice steady as he told Phyllis that if they had the power to stop a murder, then they had no choice but to act, no matter the cost, and as they prepared to move, the warehouse door suddenly creaked open, sending a jolt of panic through both of them, because in a city ruled by secrets, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news, but instead of Victor's men, it was Michael Baldwin who stepped inside, his expression grave, his eyes scanning the shadows as though expecting to find danger lurking in every corner. And the moment he saw the flash drive, his jaw tightened, because he understood instantly that Cane and Phyllis were no longer dealing with a simple corporate scandal, and when Phyllis revealed the contents of the files, the encrypted messages, the offshore operations, and the damning audio recording, Michael's usual composure cracked, his voice low as he warned them that what they possessed could destroy Victor Newman completely, but it could also put them in immediate, lethal danger because Victor would never allow evidence like this to surface, and Cane, refusing to be intimidated, declared that Victor had gone too far this time, crossing a line that couldn't be erased with money or power, and Michael, torn between his legal instincts and his loyalty to the truth, admitted that if the recording was authentic, it proved intent to orchestrate a fatal act, something even Victor couldn't spin away. Yet the challenge would be keeping the evidence safe long enough for it to matter. Because Victor's reach extended into every corner of Genoa City, from law enforcement to corporate boardrooms, and even into the darkest corners of the underworld, and as Michael offered to help secure the files through legal channels, a chilling realization struck Phyllis. Victor wouldn't just come after them. He would target everyone they cared about, turning their loved ones into leverage, because fear was his most powerful weapon. And sure enough, across town, Victor Newman stood in his office, the city skyline stretching behind him like a kingdom he refused to lose. his eyes burning with fury as his security chief reported the breach, the missing files, and the unmistakable involvement of Cane and Phyllis, and for the first time in years, Victor felt something dangerously close to vulnerability, not because he feared exposure, but because he despised losing control, and as he slammed his fist against the desk, his voice thundered with icy resolve, promising that anyone who dared challenge him would regret it, because Victor didn't just protect his empire. He annihilated threats, and as he ordered his operatives to locate the stolen data at any cost. His mind was already calculating damage control, spin strategies, and the elimination of loose ends, because in Victor's world, survival meant dominance and dominance required silence, and while Victor prepared his counterattack, Cane and Phyllis moved again, relocating the evidence, encrypting backups, and spreading fragments of the truth to trusted allies like Jack Abbott, who listened in stunned disbelief as the audio recording played. His rivalry with Victor suddenly feeling trivial in the face of such moral darkness, and Jack, though no stranger to ruthless tactics himself, felt a rare surge of righteous anger, because even he had limits, and orchestrating a silent execution crossed every line he believed in, and as Jack vowed to help expose Victor, the circle of resistance began to grow, though each new ally also meant new risks, new vulnerabilities, and new targets for Victor's retaliation, and sure enough, the backlash came swiftly, as anonymous threats began appearing. Surveillance intensified and subtle warnings were delivered through intermediaries, all carrying the same chilling message: stay silent or face the consequences. And Phyllis, who had never been one to back down, found herself grappling with a different kind of fear, because this time, the danger wasn't just emotional or reputational, it was physical, and the shadows felt closer, heavier, more menacing than ever before. Yet even as the pressure mounted, her determination hardened because she refused to let Victor's reign of intimidation continue unchecked, and Cane, haunted by the knowledge that their actions had set powerful forces in motion, stood firm beside her, because walking away now would mean allowing a crime to unfold, and that was a burden he could never carry. And as the evidence was quietly submitted to federal authorities under layers of protection and anonymity, the tension in Genoa City reached a boiling point, rumors spreading like wildfire, whispers of a scandal so massive it could topple the city's most feared figure, and Victor, sensing the shift in the air, launched a public relations offensive, painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign, his voice smooth and commanding as he denied any wrongdoing. Yet beneath the polished facade, his fury simmered, because he knew the truth was dangerous, and the truth had a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it was buried, and when he finally confronted Cane and Phyllis in person, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken threats, Victor's eyes locking onto Cane's with a cold intensity that promised retribution, his words carefully chosen, laced with both warning and disdain, as he reminded them that empires didn't fall easily and that those who challenged him often paid a steep price. And Phyllis, refusing to flinch, stared him down, her voice steady as she declared that his era of unchecked power was ending, because no amount of influence could erase what he'd done. And for a brief, electrifying moment, Victor's mask slipped, revealing a flash of something darker than anger, an unyielding belief that he was above consequence, that his vision justified any means, and as he walked away, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with danger, Cane realized that the battle they'd started was far from over, because Victor Newman didn't surrender, he retaliated, and the coming storm would test every alliance, every relationship, and every ounce of courage they possessed. Yet even in the face of looming chaos, Cane felt a quiet sense of purpose, because for the first time, Victor wasn't just being challenged in boardrooms or business deals. He was being confronted with the truth, and the truth, once unleashed, had the power to change everything. And as Genoa City braced itself for the fallout, the question was no longer whether Victor's secrets would be exposed, but how many lives would be altered before justice finally caught up with the man who believed himself untouchable.